Alright everyone, we actually start off today talking about Vermont, specifically my own hometown of Rutland, Vermont, because there was a meeting there actually. People got together and they were talking about critical race theory in schools. And it's funny because, the link in the description, archived of course from Vermont Digger, the propaganda here is actually pretty sheer. I was almost surprised because normally you get a lot of far leftism in Vermont, but you don't get this particular kind of ridicule and like side-handed attack. I'll get into that in a moment, but first and foremost, down below if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 4, sometimes 5 videos a day, but only 2 end up on YouTube, because if you do more than that, their algorithm punishes you even more than it already does. It's very, very unfortunate. They're literally punishing workhorse content creators that do old-style one-offs like I do as opposed to streaming. Here, link in the description again. You always use archive.today, by the way, from Vermont Digger. This article basically insinuates that people that are worried about critical race theory, which is, it's an ahistorical bunk of nonsense. I'll get into that as well, because, again, there are no cotton skyscrapers. Telling the truth is now considered bigoted these days in some cases. Just look at chromosomes. It's bullshit. And people therefore are concerned because, you've already got a low educational attainment for a lot of students when it comes to history. History is like basically the unloved course that everyone sort of neglects. And this has become a problem because those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So when you have a bunch of revisionistic nonsense that you're teaching to people in a postmodern fashion as opposed to telling them actual concrete details about what objectively happened. So when you go from this is a battle that Andrew Jackson was general in, to, hey, Andrew Jackson was probably secretly bisexual because this author who has a master's degree in African literature studies says so, that can become a problem. And that's just the normal revisionism we have to deal with. Critical race theory is another facade, another layer over it. And what it does is it takes revisionism, especially in the anti-white sense, does bear mentioning that that's essentially what it is on multiple levels, and it couches it as though it is somehow anti-racist. The idea is, well, we're going to teach, basically, we want to teach white people that they've done terrible things so that they'll stop doing them. That is bullshit. The idea that white people uniquely colonized, enslaved, and pillaged and that other groups of people didn't is wrong. The idea that the United States was predominantly built up on hate, bigotry, and slavery is completely wrong. Everything that critical race theory teaches is wrong. But if you look at this article, people that are pointing this out or they're questioning the term equity within its parlance, within the usage by Vermont schools and so forth, because that's part of the critical race theory bullshit thing, is the misuse of the term equity. Equity's fine. When you take that and you transmogrify the term, I've talked about linguistic warfare before, and make it mean something that it actually is not, something that's not positive anymore, not hey, we're trying to make sure everyone has an equal shot, the equality of possibility at least, and you turn it into basically bash one group of people because for political reasons, that's nonsense too. But these people are essentially being classed as rubes, and they're backwards, and there's something wrong with them. And then the article goes on to tacitly defend the Vermont school system and say, well, they're not even teaching critical race theory, they're just teaching elements of it. Well, there you go. And there's your damage control. The amount of damage control you see right now on the left, especially with regards to critical race theory, is very, very interesting. If this is a very noble and good thing, if CRT is something that we should, adopt as a culture and put in our schools, why is it that when confronted about the actual teachings therein, which, we can find out what they are because there's millions of people going to school, what, you can't fucking look at your kid's homework and see, oh, well, draw a picture of this white person being lynched. That's slightly hyperbolic before Jared Holt decides to write another hit piece or something. But when we look at it, it's funny because they always disavow the parts of it that are embarrassing in order to latch onto the, well, we're just trying to teach people about, like, the Tulsa Race Massacre. We're just trying to teach people, we're trying to make sure that they understand what a sit-in is and stuff like that. Okay, that's fine. You're already taught that year after year. Dude, every fucking year for Black History Month when I was in elementary school, You saw Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and you read 2 or 3 more books and stuff. You had basically like an associate's degree level of understanding by the end of high school of the civil rights movement. Unless you were taking like the really dumb courses. Now, of course, there could be schools that are letting people down in the sense of teaching them about that critical part of U.S. history. But what CRT appears to want to do is take that and expand it and extrapolate it to every other field. So you'd have woke math, and you have woke history that isn't even history. My biggest problem with the teachings that I see coming out of critical race theory at large has nothing to do with the inherent bigotry of saying, well, whites are colonizers, they need to kneel and apologize, and reparations would be good. That's something that's been going on before this new linguistic term was even concocted in order to try to justify hatred and bigotry against white people, by and large, in schools. I was already there. My biggest problem is simply it is objectively, historically wrong. For instance, the concept that the United States was the end-all, be-all of the slave trade and that it wasn't predominantly the Caribbean and Brazil, or that predominantly white Europeans were the only ones in the world that were ever attacking other people and overrunning their cultures. Dude, motherfucker, study world history. That's literally the history of mankind until the last century. Until roughly the last, well, not even century, really, that was the norm. That's basically how people operated. Really, what stopped that was the atomic era, because it became impossible in some cases for nations to even directly attack one another without ending the world. That's what happened, mutually assured destruction. Up until then, up until pretty much the 50s and 60s, it was a free-for-all. People attacked at a whim over little things, not just big things, and that's what humans did. And it still happens all the time. There's plenty of slavery in the world. It's just that much of it is in the third world. It's in South America or Africa or parts of the Middle East, certainly in China. There are millions of slaves there. I find it very funny that critical race theory literally ignores these principles in the modern age, and the modern age becomes history a few years later, in order to fixate on things that happened centuries ago and not even report on them truly. There are elements of the basis of critical race theory that are simply wrong. For instance, you can even drag it into the realm of ethics. Is it correct to tell a white person today that because an ancestor 300 years ago owned a slave that you should have to pay money to other people that were never enslaved? No, it's not equity. It's not fairness. It's certainly not justice. It's just kicking the same dumb can down the road. Essentially, it's a Marxist plot to split people apart. It doesn't really matter on which side you lie. Whether you're black or white makes no difference at that point. The whole idea is to create animosity between groups of people. But the problem, in the educational sense at least, is that it's ahistorical. You're teaching kids things that are simply not true. When you, for instance, have a woke math class, and you teach the student, it doesn't really matter if you got the right answer, I just want to know the reasoning behind how you got the answer that you got. Try and take that and export it to the real world, where you have to do your taxes, where you have to calculate a budget, where you have to, in engineering, you need to know how long the piece of wood is supposed to be. Try using woke math in those situations, and shit falls completely apart. Try having a generation of qualified, skilled engineers, architects, nuclear physicists, scientists, medical doctors, and all of these things with the moronic bullshit that we're pumping into schools that are already troubled. Even the better schools in the United States have problems. I was very lucky. I went to one of the top 10 schools in Vermont. Vermont ranked number 1 or 2 depending on the year in educational attainment. I got a world-class education in high school. Most U.S. students don't get that. They don't. They get a subpar education. It's not like, Swiss grade or German grade or something. Increasingly, a lot of medical doctors and engineers and stuff, they come from other countries. Why? Those countries aren't going to teach people woke filler bullshit. Some kid who goes to University of Bombay, they're not taking 10 credits of women's studies and 1800s tea culture literature and stuff like that, or feng shui. They're taking STEM courses. If there's filler at all, it's, hey, I decided I was going to learn 2 new languages. Hey, I decided that I wanted to also get a degree in history or something that's valid, something that matters. Something that matters to the world that actually adds to it. That's the problem. This should be tackled not from the backdrop of it's anti-white, which, it is, but that's not going to affect a lot of people because they've been wrongfully convinced that it's impossible to be racist against someone who's white. How this happened, I don't know. But anyway, that's not the proper framing. The proper framing is just, it's wrong. Our educational system has enough problems. Get the wokeness back out of it. Go back to the way it used to be. Get the federal government out of it regulating the fucking Common Core, which is common crap, basically. No child left. Bush's big thing. Yeah, Bush should be educating your children. Really great idea. The federal government has screwed the educational system. Wokeness is screwing the educational system. Teachers should not exist to teach your kid equity. That's not their role. Their role is to teach them academics, not morality. If you want to teach anything ethical or philosophical at all, when they're little kids in kindergarten and first grade, you should get them together and teach them critical thinking. And as long as they understand that, they can make their own decisions. They can look at the world for what it really is, and they can determine what's right, what's wrong. That's the way to do it. That's the way to have a properly functioning liberal society anyway. Simply telling people, I want you to memorize these 10 reasons why you're racist. That's not teaching them anything, except for stupidity. By the way, the cultural backlash to this will be significant. Do you really think kids, especially like if they're in elementary school, do you think they just passively absorb what their teacher tells them? No, of course not. You don't even need to teach them critical thinking. They get to middle school, they'll do a 180 and start rebelling against whatever they were taught anyway. Don't do drugs, Timmy. That's what happens. It's what happens with all the cool kids anyway. So yeah, critical race theory is basically a complete failure already. It's dumb. There's no point to it. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't teach anyone any skills that's going to help them get a job. It's not going to help them do their taxes. Shit, we don't even teach kids basic accounting in school anymore unless they elect to take it. It should be mandatory. Senior law shouldn't be a throwaway sort of, hey, yeah, we visited the county jail, yeah, we had a mock debate or something. No, you should have several years of physics when you're in high school. It should be mandatory. You shouldn't be able to graduate without 2 years of civics. Woke math should be woke math should be illegal. You're literally harming children. You are harming the next generation's capability of functioning in the wider world at large. Oh no, here's the third year of your course of why you're a bigot and why you should kneel and apologize. Yeah, no, you don't need to take math. No, we decided to get rid of the requirement for anything beyond the first year of basic math. That would be hyperbole, but they're literally doing it in U.S. universities. What did UVM just do? To the people in Vermont at large and Rutland in specific, what did the UVM just do? They decided, and this is the university that now flies the BLM flag outside the Davis Center, just to be clear. They decided to eliminate an entire slew of courses because they were over budget. What courses did they get rid of? What like master's courses? Geology. Oh yeah, that's not important. It's not important in engineering fields to know about geology. For a Vermont student, you want to work on an oil rig, you better have that fucking geology course. Nope, you can't have it anymore, it's gone. History, philosophy, the classics. Things that'll make people more literate, more enlightened. No, you know what didn't get axed? Women's studies. Filler courses. Bullshit. Wokeness 101. Race studies and apologies and reparations and shit like that. Things that have no real world value. Zero value in the world. Unless a person intends to become an academic and have a PhD in one of those fields. The number of people that are actually required to fill that number of roles is very, very small. And yet you have 100 times more people taking the filler courses because they know, if I go into the leftist studies program, all I have to do is parrot the echo chamber and I'll get an A. It's an easy way to bring your GPA up. No wonder these fucking students elect to take these courses. In some cases, they're required to take them. Yes, critical race theory should be out of all schools in the United States. Yes, it should be banned. It is directly harmful to our children, to the next generation and their educational attainment. Fuck the bigotry aspect of it entirely. It is simply ill-serving students. What other purpose does a school have except to educate them and prepare them for life? It has no further purpose. The idea that teachers need to teach your student right from wrong, that's something, motherfucker, you need to teach your kids. The teacher should not be teaching that. They're a state entity. They're funded by the taxpayers. They are a quasi-government entity. They're not allowed to teach your kid about religion, so why should they be able to teach them about racial justice? Because it's all biased bullshit anyway, and it's not even historical. It's a bunch of bullcrap. Oh, the average white person owned slaves. Everyone should have reparations. Dude, they don't even teach the true history of emancipation. They act as though the Emancipation Proclamation magically made slavery disappear. It didn't even affect slavery in the United States at the time. It only affected the states that it seceded, which didn't consider themselves part of the United States. But you didn't learn that in high school unless you took an AP course. In the basic course, you just say, oh, Abe Lincoln freed the slaves. That's what you learned. Well, it's horse shit. That's about all. Peace out.